Aaron Rodgers is likely heading to the New York Jets after 18 years with the Green Bay Packers. Now, after there was just nothing but mystery for the early part of free agency, Aaron Rodgers ended up going and talking to Pat McAfee on the Pat McAfee Show, and Rodgers said that he made his intentions clear that he wanted to play for the Jets. Rodgers did also say that he was not the holdup, and he did throw the blame on the Packers and the compensation that Green Bay wants, basically being the reason why the trade hasn't actually gone through yet. And that is a very complex situation. Now, the Green Bay Packers and the New York Jets are basically just in a very intense game of cat and mouse. See, the reality is the Packers don't actually have to trade Rodgers for quite some time if they don't want to. The Jets would obviously rather get this wrapped up sooner rather than later. Their offseason program isn't until April 17th, and real practices don't start until late May. Now, he does need and probably want to build some chemistry and learn whatever is new in the offense, but at the same time, it really shouldn't be much at all because the Jets' offensive coordinator is Nathaniel Hackett, who was the Packers' offensive coordinator for those 2 years when Rodgers won back-to-back MVPs. They already know each other. He probably already knows the offense. There's probably not a lot to worry about there. Another question is if Rodgers would even show up to the voluntary workouts. In the past, he hasn't, and mandatory minicamp isn't until mid-June, so there is the chance he just wouldn't show up anyway. The Jets would obviously rather just, get this wrapped up, have their quarterback, and be able to figure things out from there, but the Packers have all the leverage right now. Aaron Rodgers and the Jets really don't. In fact, it might actually make more sense for the Packers to just kind of wait on this. The money's a little bit confusing, but when you break it down, it makes sense because Green Bay is pretty much going to have to take a big salary cap hit no matter what. Right now, Rodgers is $31.6 million against the cap. If the Packers trade him before June 1st, Rodgers would then be $40.3 million against the cap. They could also spread that out over 2 years, so essentially that would break down to $15.8 million in 2023 and $24.5 in 2024. That's a lot of extra cap room to really build around Jordan Love. Now, there is a certain point where the Jets may actually have the leverage in trade talks, and that's the NFL draft. April 27th. I have to imagine that Green Bay probably does want draft picks that can actually help this season, but if the trade doesn't happen by then, the Packers missed the boat, and they're gonna have to just settle for picks in 2024 and beyond. I would also think that the Jets can improve enough with Rodgers on the roster to drop from that 13th overall pick that they have this draft, and next season it will probably be lower. I personally don't see a scenario now where Aaron Rodgers comes back to Green Bay for another season. I guess it's not impossible, but it really does sound like Rodgers wants out and the Packers want to move on to Jordan Love. Green Bay also has a decision to make there of whether or not they want to pick up his 5th-year option, which would be $20.3 million. See, the Packers have had a lot of positive comments about Love. Who knows if that's all just noise, but based on their track record, I do think you have to believe that Love will pan out to some degree. Remember, the Packers once had future Hall of Famer Brett Favre for 16 years, and then Green Bay was like, hey, enough is enough, we have to move on. And it was a little easy for them to move on because they already had a young quarterback sitting and learning behind him for 3 seasons. That was Aaron Rodgers, and once the Packers decided he was ready, Green Bay moved on from Favre, and they opted to trade him to none other than the New York Jets. Now, the draft pick compensation was very interesting. It was originally a conditional 4th-round pick, but it ended up becoming a 3rd-round pick because of Favre's playtime, but it extends past that too. If the Jets would have made the postseason, it would have been a 2nd-round pick, and if the Jets made it to the Super Bowl, it would have been a 1st. obviously, it worked out for the Packers because Rodgers has panned out, and now Green Bay has the same conundrum on their hands. Now the big question is what Rodgers will get traded for. The Jets have made it clear they want to keep their 2023 first rounder. I think Green Bay has completely over-exaggerated how much Rodgers is worth. The Packers plan on moving on, clearly, and that's where Rodgers wants to go. I think maybe like a third-round pick based on incentives like the Packers got back in the day, plus maybe a late-round pick would be fair. I do think the Packers are 100% going to get more than they did for Favre, but not as much as Green Bay wants for Rodgers. I'd also bet that the trade kind of depends on how much of that salary the Packers end up eating. Right now, Rodgers has $59.5 million in guarantees this season, and the Packers are probably going to pay some percentage of that depending on what the picks are in the deal. Regardless of whether or not this trade goes through, the New York Jets are very clearly preparing for life with Aaron Rodgers. It was reported that he had some players he potentially wanted the Jets to pursue. New York did already sign Allen Lazard to a 4-year, $44 million deal. That already sets him up with a familiar wide receiver. It has also been reported that the Jets have had an interest in both Randall Cobb and Mercedes Lewis. One of the most surprising players linked has actually been Odell Beckham Jr. Now, this is fair. Rodgers did even joke, who wouldn't want Odell on their team, which is fair. I don't think the Jets really have the money to pay Odell. You also don't actually need him when you already have Garrett Wilson. Who knows what the Jets are going to look like by the time Rodgers actually gets there, if he does. But the good news for New York is that he even wants to go there. Remember, Rodgers disappeared for a 4-day darkness retreat that he used to contemplate his future. He said he was actually 90% sure he was going to retire when he left for the retreat, but then something changed. The Packers wanted to move on afterwards, and Rodgers said he did wish Green Bay was more direct with what they wanted, and that led to him opting to leave for New York. I think this Aaron Rodgers situation is actually very complex, and while Rodgers is well on his way out, he's now left Green Bay with literally no leverage. They know he wants to go somewhere else, but they already have somebody waiting behind him in Jordan Love. The Packers have every bit of leverage, and they can pull this and just wait as long as they possibly want to. Green Bay will be much better off if they get some draft picks in this upcoming draft, though, and so I do expect this to finally get wrapped up. If I had to really guess, I would say probably, mid to late April before the draft, but still a little ways from right now. I do think the Packers think they're going to get a lot more for Rodgers than he's actually worth. I think a fair trade is probably like a third and a fifth or a third and a sixth. Rodgers has a big contract. Maybe if they eat a lot more of that contract, maybe bump that up to a second and a fifth or something. But if right now it seems like Green Bay wants a lot for a guy where he doesn't want to come back and you don't want him back anyway, I think the Packers are going to be just fine. I think they know exactly what they're doing in this situation. They're just going to wait it out. They can wait it out for the next month if they really want to, and I think Green Bay might just do that until the Jets are finally willing to give up what they want to give up. Regardless, it sounds like the Jets are going to get Aaron Rodgers, and whether or not you give up, a high pick or not, I think that's the right move because it's Aaron Rodgers. He's one of the best quarterbacks in football. He might be a little older, but who cares? The Jets have a great team. They're in win now mode, and so regardless of what you're giving up, going after Aaron Rodgers is the right move because he's going to make the Jets a way better team. Who knows? Aaron Rodgers only won one Super Bowl when he was in Green Bay. Maybe he can get one more before it's all said and done, like Peyton Manning did or Tom Brady.